Do you need a fast start guide for a swimming pool? I bet you that there's a lot of things that you're looking at with this new swimming pool that you've got, and you're kind of overwhelmed with like, okay, I definitely need, I need to know chemistry. I need to, vacuum. I need to skim debris. There's a bunch of stuff, but it's overwhelming. There's no way for you to prioritize at this point and know like, well, what are the important things I gotta make sure that I don't miss? And that's what this list is. I'm going to give you kind of like a basics list, and this will apply to basically any swimming pool. If you're doing these things, you're doing well. If you don't understand some of these things that I'm referencing, because I'm kind of just glossing over each of them quickly, literally Google the exact question that I'm asking, and you'll probably find an answer. Or you could even just ask a question in the comments section below, and I'll link you out to resources on each of these things. So we'll get started here. So the first thing you need to know is brushing the pool once per week minimum. Walls and floor, take a nylon bristled brush all of the walls, all of the floor. This stops debris from sticking to the walls and floor. There's certain kinds of bacteria and biofilms which can grow, and over time it would become a problem, and you just eliminate that by brushing the walls and floor, and that way you don't have a bunch of organic contaminants stuck there, which is going to turn into a problem later on. So that's regular maintenance, brushing walls and floor at least once per week. Next, skimming debris. If you see a bunch of leaves floating in your pool, go skim them if you have the time. If you let them stay there, they will eventually waterlog and float to the bottom, and now they are depleting your free chlorine levels and causing other chemistry-related problems, potentially causing staining. Solve it completely by just scooping them when you see them. I mean, you don't have to stand vigilant guard next to your pool, but if you have the time and you see a bunch of debris, go ahead and scoop the debris. So next, strainer baskets for the pump and the skimmer. You need to make sure that these stay clear of debris. I can't tell you clean the strainer baskets once a week because maybe you have 100 maple trees next to your pool, and it's you got to clean it every 7 minutes, or the strainer baskets are going to be all jammed up. It really depends. Every pool really genuinely is unique, so I can only give you general advice. Keep the strainer baskets clean. You don't want the pump to be struggling to get water and overheating and causing damage. And further to that, if the strainer baskets become cracked, broken, or missing, replace them because they're there for a reason. You need to capture the debris, the physical debris, both in the skimmer and the pump strainer baskets. And your regular maintenance includes making sure those stay clean and free of debris regularly. Moving on, we have the filter pressure, very important. The big question people have with swimming pools is, well, how do I know when I need to clean this filter? You know you need to clean the filter, you just don't know when. So the way that you know this is you start with a clean filter. Regardless of what kind of filter you have, you clean it. Backwashing a sand filter, or cleaning the cartridges in a cartridge filter, recharging a DE filter. Once it's clean, record the system operating pressure. Every filter has a pressure gauge. This is why it has one. Record the clean operational pressure of your system. Every swimming pool is unique, so I can't tell you what your pressure would be. Nobody can tell you what your pressure would be. You have to know what yours is when your filter media is clean. Write it down in permanent marker on the wall next to the filter. And know this, when the pressure goes up in the filter, it means that your filter is dirty and it's time to clean your filter media. Typically speaking, 7 psi or so higher than your clean operational pressure is the time that you need to clean the filter. And also know this, you don't have to wait that long. If you go much sooner than that, there's no disadvantage at all, except for the fact that you have to put in a little bit extra effort. Moving on, the chemicals that you need to adjust in your pool. I think you're going to have to learn about pool chemistry. It's kind of a learning curve that comes with pool ownership, but the order of operations and the things that you need to adjust can be confusing. It's easy to get some bad advice. You should adjust these chemicals in this order. Total alkalinity comes first, followed by the pH. Then you adjust the calcium hardness. Then you adjust the cyanuric acid level, which is the stabilizer, and then your chlorine levels. And the amounts that you need for each, again, every swimming pool is unique, but there are standardized amounts for these things. Like you should probably be, 100 to 120 parts per million for alkalinity. Your pH should be 7.4 if you can achieve it directly on that mark. What else did we have? Calcium hardness, 200 to 400 parts per million, depending on what kind of swimming pool you have. Cyanuric acid should be 30 to 70 parts per million. 30 to 50 parts per million is your ideal amount, but 70 parts per million is acceptable if you have a saltwater swimming pool. And there's more things to know, like your chlorine should be above 1 part per million all the time. Your phosphate levels should be under 500 parts per billion. There's a lot to know, but just knowing the order that you go in is very important as well, because if you're trying to adjust your chemicals in the wrong order, you're going to be running in circles. And again, it's pretty easy to come by some bad advice. So the order that I just listed it in, that's the order you should be going in. Moving along, testing your water. If you're only using test strips, you're gonna struggle. They're super convenient. What you give up is accuracy. And this is especially true for the pH reading. pH is specifically hard to measure and read with a test strip. So if you kind of get the idea that these test strips are good and they're convenient and you should use them for quick checks, but you should also be doing more detailed water analysis. And whether that is going to a local pool and spa store and getting a free water analysis done, or, buying a more capable at-home test kit, something like from Taylor Technologies, they're kind of the gold standard for at-home test kits for pools and spas. That would be a great idea. And then use the test strips just as like quick double check for sanitizer level and things like that. Your life will get a lot easier balancing your pool chemistry when you're not struggling so much to read that pH level on the test strips. Moving along. Do not let your chlorine drop to zero. That's one where people really struggle. You try to run a low level of chlorine and you're going to keep ending up with green water. When the water turns green, sometimes you can fix it quickly. Sometimes it's a huge pain in the butt. And the solution there is don't let it turn green. So keep your chlorine level above zero at all times. Just remember that. That's very important. Moving along, your CYA, cyanuric acid or stabilizer, I mentioned it earlier, 30 to 70 parts per million, with 30 to 50 parts per million being optimum, up to 70 parts per million if you have a saltwater chlorinator system is acceptable. So this is the sunscreen for chlorine. This is what prevents the sun and the UV from degrading all the chlorine that you put in your pool every day. The number that you have is very important. If you run 80, 100, 150 parts per million of cyanuric acid, your chlorine is not able to work effectively, and you need to increase your chlorine levels along with your increasing CYA levels. Most people don't realize that. And I know I'm getting a little technical for an introductory video here, but the reality is you need to know this. Keep your CYA at 30 to 70 parts per million. If you are using chlorine pucks, then you are adding CYA to the water every time you use another chlorine puck, and that CYA level is going to keep climbing, and eventually you will end up with green water, even if you have a measurable chlorine level, because your chlorine level is probably not high enough. So keep that CYA at 30 to 70 parts per million, and at that point switch to an unstabilized chlorine source such that you don't keep increasing that CYA level, because getting rid of CYA is difficult. You essentially have to partially drain and refill to lower that CYA level if you let it get too high. So moving on to the last thing I want to mention here. I mentioned chlorine, don't let it drop to zero. You should watch for combined chlorine. It's kind of one of these things that is an important thing that you definitely need to know, but it'll get missed at first. And at some point you'll end up with green water. What you need to know is the free chlorine is the chlorine that's available in your water to do its job and sanitize stuff. The total chlorine is all of the chlorine in the water. And sometimes there's a difference between these two measurements. The free chlorine and the total chlorine are not equal. And when that happens, the difference between the two is called combined chlorine. This is the chlorine which has already done its job. It's already combined with something like organic debris in the pool, and now it's no longer available to kill bacteria or sanitize, do its thing in the water. And so as a result, what you need to do, or you need to be aware of, is that the free chlorine and the total chlorine should be exactly equal in a perfectly balanced swimming pool. When the free chlorine and the total chlorine are no longer equal, when there is a difference between these two numbers, you have a problem growing. When the difference is 0.1 parts per million, 0.3, 0.5 parts per million, now you're getting kind of a serious problem. By the time you reach 1 part per million difference between free chlorine and total chlorine, indicating 1 part per million of combined chlorine present in your pool, now your water's kind of a problem. It doesn't look very good. It doesn't smell very good. And this is where a lot of swimming pool owners kind of spend their life with their pool, and they don't understand that combined chlorine is something that's important. You can't measure it directly. You can only measure free and total and know it's the difference between the two. So we covered a lot of ground with this list here, with this introductory list, but this is what you need to know. If you don't know everything that I just said on this list, you are going to have a problem. So it's a good idea to get in front of that now. And again, if something, is just over your head and you can't seem to find some resource information for it, please make a comment below. I'd be happy to point you towards something that's going to, go into more depth on each of these subjects. And I hope you found this information helpful. And if you did, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can check out my website, swimmingpoolsteve.com.